There are plenty of other names who are on the trade deadline, including one of my longtime favorite players, former UCF star, and now a secondary piece in the backfield for the Indianapolis Colts, Marlon Mack. After they drafted Jonathan Taylor, Mack had sat out a game. I think it was a healthy scratch because he had asked for a trade and they were interested in trading him, but now they're actually kind of using him and incorporating him to the offense. And it's one of those things where it feels like if you're the Colts and you're Frank Reich, you like Marlon Mack, you're glad to get his production, but you're also sort of showcasing him a little bit to try and generate some interest. Do you hear anything about where Mack could go, or if teams are indeed intrigued by the idea of trading for a veteran running back?
Yeah, you're right, Will. You got to show him just enough to remind people that he has gotten over his injury from last year, but definitely not to the point where you ruin your asset. So this morning I was, talking to some sources, trying to figure out what was going on with potential trade pieces. And I reported this morning that the Chiefs, the 49ers, Saints, and Panthers are among teams that have been involved in preliminary conversations, though since I tweeted that. A Panthers league source did reach out to me and wanted to point that it was the Colts who reached out and not them. But either way, the conversation is taking place. All of those teams, at least, make sense from the standpoint of looking at their running back depth. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey has not been, durable. You look at the Saints with Kamara, and then, Jones being injured, and Washington stepping up there, and then the two rookies with the 49ers and the Chiefs and what have you. And so those are teams that certainly make sense to look. And he's a piece that has been productive before and is just kind of sitting there with respect to not giving his all just because you have Jonathan Taylor and Hines, in front of him. So I believe that piece makes sense, for one of those teams. And also what makes sense, and I actually forgot to mention this in my report just an hour ago, is that any team that would get Mack would just be acquiring his $1 million base salary, which is guaranteed, but at a prorated rate based on where we are in the season.
Oh, so that's a really cheap addition for a team
and that's a very important part that I forgot to mention. That as I just thought about, I was like, I forgot to say that. But yeah, it doesn't cost much. So easy pickings, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you would almost think that. I mean, Chris Ballard's really good at this. It's entirely possible that he, thought about the way that they wanted to structure that contract. Knowing that when they brought Mack back, that when they engineered return of the Mack, if you will, that they may eventually want to deal him down the road.
But
as
I
far
would say
as other any other buzz on buyers or sellers at the market, just in general, clearly the Jets, Texans, and Jaguars, 3 worst teams in football, and not teams that, the Jets is like, so the Seahawks and like the Eagle or the Seahawks and why am I blanking on and the Dolphins, who are teams that have not been playing very well, but also have high first round picks currently that they're giving away, don't feel like teams that want to sell because they still want to try and improve, so they don't end up giving away a top 10 pick and get blasted for it. But teams like the Jets, Texans, and Jaguars, they are trying to acquire assets and they're not winning this year. Do you see them selling? Are there any pieces we could see sold off from there, from those bottom tier teams potentially, or will those teams be active in the market, I guess?
So one thing I really quickly before I answer that wanted to say about Marlon Mack was that 2 things. I believe that the Colts could be hanging on to him just because you never know, just as Chris Rock says, in case ish happens, one of those guys goes down that you have, and now all of a sudden you need Marlon Mack. So I think that's one thing. And then 2, they could also be waiting to see, just best case scenario in terms of compensation package, because certainly from an economic standpoint, he's not a hard asset to move. So that was one thing I wanted to say. Now, with regards to teams that I think at least I would be looking at, it would be the Broncos, Kyle Fuller. They have a surplus of cornerbacks, a team that it needs help in the secondary, could be looking to pluck him. I think that you have Nick Foles, who is just, sitting there at quarterback that's available for any team. And by the way, he has a Super Bowl ring. Didn't work for him in Jacksonville, hasn't been super great in Chicago, but nonetheless, he does have that experience. And I do believe that with Nick Foles, it's really about everything kind of coalescing with him from a environment standpoint and the coaching staff and the energy that he gets from his teammates. And he can always rise to the occasion because he's done it before. And then maybe Clellan, with the Raiders is a pick that they got. I believe it was a 4th overall pick, and hasn't necessarily materialized for Oakland, but is maybe a player that someone could feel like, oh, maybe we could do better with him. So when I kind of just look up and down the rosters, that might be something that somebody gets enticed with, particularly if the need arises with attrition with any of these games that materialize. And then I also just think, even though it might sound weird, and if that was like a dark horse craziness, you never know, just depending on maybe how this game goes and the next game goes for the Denver Broncos. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I could see why a team may just continue to try to call on Von Miller, if you want to go crazy. I'm not saying I have any specific information that's happening, but he has 3.5 sacks entering this game tonight against the Browns and Broncos. We'll see if they,
Browns win, and suddenly the Broncos are reeling, like 3-4, and
that's what I'm saying. That's the only reason why I'm saying if that happens, and then we have 12 days, so that means that there would still be another game that would happen for the Broncos. So if you suddenly drop 2, and then you have this, contract here, maybe that might be something to look at.
Yep, and. If he was, so last year of Von Miller's contract, unrestricted free agent in the offseason, would make a ton of sense as a guy who could bolster a playoff team with their pass rush help. Broncos get back some kind of compensation, you get a little salary cap relief, I guess. No, I mean, makes a lot of sense.
I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying Will, but I'm just saying.
Saying. And the other thing, Josina, we've seen where, because we saw it with Zach Ertz when he was traded last week. Now they wanted to let him play on a Thursday, and that deal was clearly in place. They wanted to give him that farewell tour in Philadelphia. But with that extra 10 days, if you play on Thursday and you lose, maybe you spend the weekend sort of recalibrating where you're at, and you've got more time to call people before those Sunday games.